The first attack didn't come with warning sirens or flashes in the sky. It came quietly, like the first spark of a match in a darkened room, easy to overlook, impossible to ignore once it caught flame. People were still going about their days, still living in a fragile peace, when the invaders chose their moment. No grand speeches. No demands. Only fire. At first it was a city. One moment alive with traffic, voices, laughter, and human routine, and the next burning. Ships descended, alien in shape and terrifying in silence, their weapons carving through streets as if they were made of paper. Survivors told stories of shadows moving through the smoke, figures that were not human, faces hidden by masks or scales or something worse. Nobody knew what they wanted. Nobody even knew who they were. The news spread faster than the flames. Cities fell. Governments scrambled. Soldiers were called, but the weapons humanity had built for itself seemed small in the face of what came down from the stars. Missiles struck but were swallowed by shields. Jets screamed through the air only to vanish in explosions of light. What hope could there be, people whispered, against an enemy that had crossed galaxies just to erase them? But humanity has never been one to bow quietly. Fear, yes, every heart beat with it. But there was also something else. A stubbornness. A refusal to lie down. Every survivor carried a story of resistance, of someone who stood when they should have run, of someone who fought when surrender would have been easier. The invaders lit the fire, but in doing so, they woke something ancient inside the human race. It began in the ruins. A young soldier, separated from his unit, crawling out of rubble with nothing but a rifle and blood in his mouth, refused to quit. He stumbled across families hiding in a collapsed subway, and somehow, against the odds, he led them out. His act sparked whispers among the survivors. If one man could fight, maybe others could too. Across oceans, in shattered towns and broken cities, small groups began to rise. Farmers with shotguns. Mechanics turning machines into weapons. Scientists piecing together fragments of alien tech left behind in the chaos. Humanity didn't have shields or warships. But humanity had anger. Humanity had desperation. And humanity had a memory older than any invader. A history of fighting against impossible odds. The invaders underestimated that. They saw weakness in our chaos, not realizing that chaos was where humans thrived. For every building they destroyed, 10 more people swore vengeance. For every family torn apart, another hand gripped a weapon tighter. We were not fighting for conquest. We were fighting for survival. That kind of war leaves no room for mercy. And yet, the story is not just about battles. It's about choices. The choice to stand when the sky itself was falling. The choice to protect strangers as if they were blood. The choice to say enough when everything seemed lost. Humanity's nightmare wasn't just built from firepower. It was built from willpower. From sacrifice. From a unity the invaders could not comprehend. There was a moment, the one history would later mark as the turning point, when the invaders pushed too far. They struck a settlement hidden in the mountains, expecting another simple victory. But what they found waiting was not fear. It was rage. Men, women, and children armed with whatever they could carry, refusing to yield even as the sky rained fire. The battle was short, brutal, and costly, but when the smoke cleared for the first time, it was the invaders who retreated. Humanity had drawn blood. And blood changed everything. The nightmare began to grow. Small victories turned into larger ones. Each alien weapon captured became a seed for new designs. Each fallen soldier became fuel for the fire burning in those who remained. The world was no longer just surviving, it was adapting, learning, striking back. The invaders had unleashed hell upon Earth. But what they had truly done was awaken something far worse. Imagine an enemy that does not sleep. An enemy that does not forgive. An enemy that remembers every wound, every life stolen, and carries that memory into battle with a fury that burns hotter than any weapon. That was humanity now. Not an army. Not a fleet. A storm. A nightmare. A force no longer fighting for hope, but for vengeance. And yet, even as humanity rose, the cost grew higher. Families torn apart. Cities left as ash. Children forced to carry burdens too heavy for their shoulders. Victory was not clean. It was never meant to be. The inferno that humanity became burned everything in its path, including itself. But no one stopped. No one could stop. Because if they did, there would be nothing left. The invaders began to realize it. The same fire they had ignited was spreading beyond their control. They had come expecting prey and instead found predators. They had come expecting to conquer, and instead were being dragged into a war they could not understand. For them, war was calculation. For humanity, war was survival. And there is nothing more terrifying in all the galaxies than a species fighting extinction with nothing left to lose. The night skies grew louder. Human weapons, once primitive, now struck with precision born of stolen alien designs. Resistance movements turned into organized armies. The hunted had become the hunters. And still, somewhere in the shadows the question lingered, was this truly victory or was humanity becoming something darker, something the invaders themselves had feared? That question would not be answered in the ashes of the first battles. It would only grow as the war spread, as Earth itself became the forge that shaped humanity into something unrecognizable. The Inferno was no longer just a response. It was a destiny. But destinies are fragile. The invaders were not finished. Their true strength had not yet been revealed. And as humanity pushed back with fire and fury, there were whispers, rumors of weapons not yet used, forces not yet unleashed. The war was far from over. Somewhere above the clouds the invaders were watching, calculating, waiting. And humanity, burning brighter than ever before, was marching straight into the unknown. The fire was only beginning. The fire was only beginning. The days after the first victories were not filled with celebration. They were filled with silence, exhaustion, and the gnawing knowledge that the war had only just started. Survivors walked through the ruins of what used to be neighborhoods, picking through broken bricks and melted glass, hoping to find something, anything, that had not been destroyed. A photograph. A locket. A book that hadn't turned to ash. Each object carried the weight of a lost world, a reminder of what had been stolen. And in those ruins, something else began to stir. People found each other. Families joined with strangers. Soldiers, once bound by uniform and command, now fought alongside farmers, teachers, mechanics, and children who had no choice but to grow old before their time. It wasn't unity born from speeches. It was survival carved out of desperation. But survival alone wasn't enough. The first time humanity drew blood from the invaders, it felt unreal. Alien machines lay smoldering, their strange metals cooling in the dirt, their pilots, if that's what they were, slain. People stood around those wrecks, afraid to even touch them at first. The bodies weren't like anything human eyes had seen before. Some were armored in what looked like natural plates. Others were hidden inside strange breathing systems. None of them looked alike. That was the first mystery. They weren't one species. They were many. Different forms, different sizes, all fighting together under one banner. That discovery chilled people more than the sight of their weapons. It wasn't just one enemy. It was many bound together. And if they could cooperate across such differences, how could humanity hope to stand against them for long? Still, curiosity was stronger than fear. Engineers stripped pieces of the wreckage. Scientists huddled over fragments of alien devices, sketching diagrams under candlelight when the power grids failed. Every shard was a puzzle. Every glowing crystal, every strange metal plate carried secrets. Some whispered that the invaders had made a mistake leaving so much behind. Others wondered if it wasn't a mistake at all, that maybe the wreckage was a trap, technology laced with hidden poisons or signals calling reinforcements. But humanity didn't stop. They couldn't. Every scrap was too precious to ignore. In one shattered city, beneath the wreckage of a hospital, a group of survivors managed to power up a piece of alien machinery. Nobody knew what it was at first. It hummed and pulsed with a light that felt alive, a heartbeat of alien energy. Some wanted to smash it, afraid it would bring more destruction. But one old engineer saw potential. He worked for days without rest, fingers trembling as he pieced together what little he could. When the machine finally roared to life, it created a barrier, transparent, shimmering, capable of withstanding even the blasts from the invaders' weapons. It was the first shield humanity had ever owned. Not built by human hands but stolen, adapted, forced into existence through determination. The story spread faster than the invaders' ships. People clung to it like a lifeline. If one shield could be made, more could follow. And so the fire spread. Across mountains, deserts, and broken coasts, stories of defiance multiplied. Each small act of resistance became fuel. A group of fishermen sinking an alien transport with explosives made from fuel drums. A band of children stealing supplies from invader patrols and vanishing into the forests. A mother carrying her wounded child across miles of wreckage, refusing to give him up, only to stumble into a camp where both became part of the resistance. Each story fed the next. Humanity wasn't just fighting with weapons. They were fighting with memory, with myth, with a growing belief that they could win if they endured. And yet the invaders adapted too. The next wave was different. Where before their ships descended in silence, now they came with something worse, precision. They no longer attacked randomly. They targeted strongholds, shelters, places where resistance was rumored to grow. Every time a camp was built, there was the fear that the sky would split open the next day. That fear shaped people. It hardened them. It sharpened them. There were whispers that humanity had begun to change. Soldiers who once fought with discipline now fought like predators, unpredictable and merciless. People who had never raised a weapon in their lives now did so without hesitation. Something inside humanity was shifting, something raw and dangerous. Some feared it. Others embraced it. But the real mystery wasn't in the people. It was in the invaders themselves. Captured weapons told one story. Captured corpses told another. Those who studied them began to realize the invaders weren't united by choice. They were bound by force. Different species, some looked fragile, some monstrous, all driven to fight under one flag. What power could compel so many races, with such different forms, to march together against humanity? The question ate at the survivors. If their enemy was not one race but many, then who was truly in command? The answer never came directly. But rumors began to spread. Strange signals were intercepted, strange patterns in the sky that suggested something larger, something unseen, watched from beyond. The ships that descended to Earth were terrifying, but they weren't the heart of the invasion. They were only the hands of it. Still, humanity pushed forward. In the ruins of a once great capital, survivors began to rebuild, not homes, not schools, but a fortress. Walls rose from rubble, reinforced with steel and alien metal alike. The fortress became a symbol. For the first time since the first sparks of war, humanity had something that felt permanent, something that stood not just to resist but to defy. From its gates, missions spread. Groups moved into enemy territory, striking at supply lines, stealing fuel, destroying outposts. Each victory carried a cost, but each cost was born with pride. Humanity was no longer cowering in the shadows. They were hunting. And yet, the greater mystery lingered like smoke. What did the invaders truly want? They had destroyed cities, yes, but they had not erased everything. Some places they left untouched. Some people were captured, not killed. Camps of survivors told of strange experiments, of being taken and returned, changed in ways they couldn't explain. One man swore he could hear voices in his head that were not his own, whispers in a language he didn't know but somehow understood. A woman claimed her blood no longer felt like her own, that something had been placed inside her. Were the invaders here to conquer Earth? Or were they here for something deeper, something hidden within humanity itself? The questions tore at the survivors' minds. But there was no time to dwell. Each day brought new battles, new losses, new fires. And with every fire, the Inferno grew stronger. Humanity was changing. No longer the same species that had once looked up at the stars with wonder. Now they looked with fury. The invaders had come expecting prey. Instead they had made predators. But even predators bleed. The fortress in the ruins stood strong until the day the sky split open again. This time it was not a handful of ships. It was an armada. Dark clouds formed not from weather but from the shadows of countless vessels. The ground shook as beams of light tore through the earth. The air itself seemed to scream. Inside the fortress people prepared. Children clung to their parents, soldiers gripped weapons, engineers whispered prayers over machines that might fail them. Everyone knew what was coming. The greatest fire yet. And when the first ship descended, larger than any before, its hull glowing with a strange, pulsing light, every human heart beat with the same thought. This was not just another battle. This was a message. The invaders had finally taken notice. And humanity, battered, scarred, and burning with rage, stood ready to answer. But what they didn't know, what they couldn't know, was that the invaders weren't done holding back. What they had seen so far was only the beginning. The true nightmare, the one waiting in the silence beyond the stars, was still coming. The question wasn't whether humanity could survive. The question was what humanity would become in the process. Because fire changes everything it touches. And the inferno humanity had become was spreading faster than even they realized. The fortress held for as long as it could. The walls glowed with stolen alien shielding, patched together with human steel, wires, and prayers. Every man, woman, and child inside felt the weight of what was coming. Above them, the sky wasn't just filled with enemy ships, it was covered, blotted out by the dark presence of something larger than any human mind had prepared for. The smaller ships broke off first, descending in swarms like predators circling prey. Their engines screamed in the night, cutting across the ruined skyline, unleashing blasts that shook the earth. Every strike sent shockwaves through the fortress. Dust rained from the ceiling. People clutched one another and waited for the next impact. But humanity did not cower. Not anymore. Fighters poured from the gates, ragged uniforms mixed with scavenged armor, weapons human and alien alike strapped to their backs. They didn't look like soldiers. They looked like survivors who had turned survival itself into a weapon. The sound of their voices carried through the smoke, a roar not of fear but of fury. The first clash was chaos. Alien machines thundered across the ground, their weapons slicing through barricades like knives through paper. But humans had laid traps. Explosives hidden in the rubble ignited, fireballs ripping enemy formations apart. Gunfire rattled. Energy blasts screamed through the air. The ground turned into a battlefield of fire and shadows. It wasn't clean. It wasn't perfect. But it was brutal. For every human that fell, another rose, fueled by rage, by memory, by the simple refusal to give up. And yet, the fortress walls shook again, not from the battle below but from above. The massive ship still hung in the sky, silent, unmoving, its glowing hull watching like an eye that refused to blink. Its silence was worse than the noise. It felt patient, as if it was waiting for something. And deep down, everyone inside the fortress knew, the real attack hadn't started yet. Inside the command chamber, the leaders of the resistance stood over maps lit by flickering lamps. Their faces were pale, their eyes hollow, but their voices were steady. Every word was about survival. Every choice came with cost. Do they hold the fortress or do they abandon it and scatter? Do they spend lives now to buy time or retreat and risk being hunted down one by one? No choice felt right. Every path carried loss. But there was no time left. The massive ship finally stirred. Light rippled across its hull, brighter than fire, colder than ice. A sound like thunder rolled across the earth, not from the sky but inside the skulls of every human who heard it. People clutched their heads, crying out. Some fell to their knees. Others screamed. It wasn't just sound. It was something deeper, like a voice pressing into their bones, demanding to be heard. Nobody understood the words, but everyone felt the intent. It was not communication. It was dominance. It was the feeling of something vast and inhuman forcing itself into the minds of every living person below. And in that moment, something cracked. Some humans began to falter, their eyes going distant, their hands shaking as if pulled by invisible strings. Families screamed as their loved ones stood in silence, unmoving, staring at the ship as though awaiting command. It wasn't enough for the invaders to destroy humanity. They wanted to take them, bend them, turn them. That was the nightmare no one had spoken aloud. To lose the war was one thing. But to lose themselves, to become part of the same force that had come to burn them, was unthinkable. And still humanity fought back. The sound of gunfire roared louder, almost desperate, as if every shot was a scream of defiance against the ship above. The fortress walls glowed brighter, straining against the bombardments. The ground was littered with bodies, human and alien alike, the line between them blurring in the smoke. But in the middle of the chaos, something strange happened. A captured device, one of the alien machines stripped apart and rebuilt in secret, flickered to life in the command chamber. Nobody had touched it. Nobody had powered it. But in the moment the great ship sent its signal, the machine responded. Lights flared across its surface. Symbols carved into its metal pulsed, shifting in patterns too fast for human eyes to follow. The scientists froze, their hands trembling. It wasn't a weapon. At least, not in any way they understood. It was a key. A key to what, they didn't know. But the timing couldn't be chance. The ship above had awakened it. And now it pulsed with a rhythm that felt almost alive, calling, responding, resonating with the presence above. Some believed it was salvation. Others believed it was doom. But one truth became clear. Whatever that machine was meant for, it had not been designed by human hands. The fortress shook again. The skies burned brighter. Screams echoed from the walls. Humanity stood at the edge, the fire inside them raging, but the shadows pressing harder than ever. The massive ship above finally began to open. Its hull split apart like the shell of a creature revealing its heart. Inside, light poured downward, a column so blinding that even those who had seen entire cities burn flinched away. Something was descending, massive and slow, the outline of a figure, or maybe many figures, shrouded in the light. Nobody knew what it was. Nobody had words for it. But every instinct screamed the same thing. This was the moment. The turning point. The nightmare the invaders had hidden until now. And as the fortress shook, as the fire roared, as the strange machine pulsed with alien symbols, every heart beat with the same question. Was humanity ready? Because if they weren't, the inferno they had become might be swallowed by the darkness descending from the sky. The light pouring from the ship did not fade. It grew, swallowing the night sky, turning the ruins into a landscape of silver shadows. The figure within it lowered slowly, and for a moment it looked as though the entire world held its breath. The defenders on the fortress walls stopped firing. The alien machines paused mid-advance. Even the screams seemed to die, smothered by something heavier than silence. Then came the realization: the figure was not a weapon. It was a person. Or something meant to look like one. It walked forward, tall, cloaked in light that clung to its frame like liquid fire. Its steps were slow but steady, every movement deliberate, as though the earth itself bent to carry it. When it spoke, the sound wasn't a voice in the air. It was a voice inside every mind, cutting past language, cutting past thought. You were not meant to endure. The words struck harder than any bombardment. Men dropped their rifles. Mothers clutched their children tighter. The message was clear: this was no invader soldier, no faceless pilot. This was something higher. A commander. Maybe the commander. And it had come not to fight, but to pronounce judgment. But before anyone could react, the captured alien device inside the fortress pulsed with violent light. The symbols across its surface shifted again, rearranging themselves into shapes that no human mind should have recognized, and yet, somehow, they did. People who had never studied a symbol in their lives suddenly felt they understood it. They felt it was calling to them, speaking not through sound but memory. That was when the second twist struck like a blade. The device wasn't alien at all. Not fully. The scientists shouted, pointing at the shapes forming on the metal. These weren't new. These weren't foreign. They were old. Too old. Fragments of the patterns matched markings found in the deepest caves of Earth, symbols carved by hands thousands of years ago, long before the first cities rose. Humanity had seen them before, had forgotten them, had buried them beneath time. The room fell into chaos. Some refused to believe it. Others wept. The device, the enemy, the invasion, it wasn't just an attack from beyond the stars. It was tied to Earth itself. Humanity had been touched before, shaped before. And now, whatever force stood above them had come to finish what it started. The fortress shook again as the figure descended closer. The light rolling from its body began to warp the very air, bending shadows, burning cracks into the ground. Soldiers raised their rifles again, firing in panic, but the bullets vanished before they touched it, swallowed by the light. The voice spoke again, calm and cruel. You are fire without purpose. Left unchecked, you consume yourselves. Left guided, you consume all. We lit the spark. We come now to claim what was always ours. The words hit harder than weapons because they carried a truth nobody wanted to face. Had humanity always been part of this? Was the rage burning in them, the inferno they had become, something planted long ago? Was their defiance theirs at all? Or was it the nightmare the invaders had been waiting for? The defenders on the wall wavered. Fear threatened to smother the fire in their hearts. But then in the chaos a sound cut through. It wasn't alien. It wasn't cosmic. It was human. A single shout from the fortress gates, raw and furious. Others followed, voices rising, breaking the spell. The fire inside them roared again. Even if what the figure said was true, even if humanity's rage had been planted, it didn't matter. It was theirs now. The resistance fired back, weapons rattling like thunder. Explosions lit the battlefield. The figure did not fall, but for the first time it staggered. The light around it flickered just for a breath. That flicker was enough to ignite hope. But hope came at a price. The alien forces surged again, faster and harder than before, as though driven by the will of their commander. The fortress walls cracked. The shield shimmered, threatening to fail. The defenders were being pushed to the edge. And then the captured device screamed. The symbols blazed white, burning themselves into the eyes of everyone who looked at them. A surge of energy ripped through the chamber, knocking people to their knees. For a moment, time itself seemed to twist. And in that blinding moment, a vision cut through the minds of the survivors. They saw stars. Endless stars. Worlds burning. Armies marching not just against Earth, but against countless others. Humanity was not the first. Humanity was not the only. The inferno they had become was part of a cycle that stretched across galaxies. Civilizations lit the fire. And then the fire consumed them. The fortress defenders gasped, shaking, some sobbing, others screaming. The truth was worse than they feared. The war on Earth was not about conquest. It was about containment. Humanity's rage, humanity's will to endure, it was not a weakness. It was a threat. One the invaders had come to extinguish before it spread beyond control. The figure in light stepped closer, its voice filling every crack of the fortress walls. You were never meant to escape this world. The ground split. The shield cracked. The light poured brighter. And still humanity fought on. The stakes had never been higher. It was no longer just a battle for Earth. It was a battle to decide whether humanity was truly free, or whether they had always been part of someone else's nightmare. The fire inside them burned hotter than ever, but the shadows pressed closer. And as the fortress shook on the edge of collapse, every survivor knew one thing. The climax was coming, and whatever happened next would decide not just the fate of Earth, but the fate of humanity itself. The ground split wider as the massive ship poured its light into the fortress, the figure at its heart moving closer with each step. The walls cracked. The shields that had held for so long flickered and died. The defenders stood exposed beneath the shadow of something that seemed too vast, too ancient, to be fought. Yet not a single human ran. They tightened their grips on their weapons, lifted their eyes, and stared into the blaze that threatened to erase them. The figure raised its hand. The battlefield froze. Alien machines halted mid-stride. Human rifles refused to fire. The air itself felt heavy, locked in place by a force no one could see. The voice returned, cold and absolute. "You are ours. The spark we planted burns too bright. It will spread and it will consume. We end it here." For a heartbeat, despair settled across the fortress. Faces dropped. Tears cut through dirt and ash. The fire that had carried them this far seemed to dim. But then, from the depths of the fortress, the captured alien device blazed again. Its light cut through the commander's glow, a different rhythm, a different call. The symbols shifted faster than ever, and suddenly the frozen humans moved again. It wasn't just technology. It wasn't just a weapon. It was a mirror. A piece of the same force that had created their enemy, yet it resonated with humanity instead. The scientists screamed for the fighters to protect it. The defenders surged forward, throwing themselves into the battle even as the commander's light grew harsher. Gunfire cracked through the air again. Explosions tore holes in the earth. Humans charged into the storm, driven by something beyond fear. The battle turned raw and desperate, every moment hanging on the edge of collapse. For every alien machine destroyed, two more pressed forward. For every fighter who fell, another screamed their name and pushed harder. Then came the moment. The device reached its peak, the symbols locking into a pattern that burned itself into every human heart. Memories not their own rushed through their minds, images of ancient fires, of battles fought long before Earth, of civilizations that had risen and been crushed. Humanity saw it all, the endless cycle, the truth the invaders had hidden. They had not come to teach. They had not come to save. They had come to erase. And that truth broke the last chains of fear. The fortress roared. Humanity roared. They weren't prey. They weren't fuel for some alien cycle. They were something else, something new. The fire they carried was not meant to be controlled. It was meant to burn. The defenders surged together, not as scattered fighters but as one storm. Weapons hammered into the alien lines. Traps detonated in perfect timing. Even unarmed survivors hurled stones, swung pipes, and screamed their defiance. The battlefield became an inferno. And the commander in the light staggered again. The glow around it cracked, revealing a form beneath, not a god, not a perfect being, but a body. Mortal. Fallible. For the first time it seemed uncertain. For the first time it faltered. The scientists screamed that the device was reaching its limit. If it unleashed what it held, it might burn the fortress to ash along with everything else. The choice lay bare, risk everything or fall quietly into chains. The fighters didn't hesitate. They chose fire. The device unleashed a wave that ripped across the battlefield. The symbols burst free, painted across the air like living fire. The light of the commander shattered under its force. Alien machines froze, convulsed, and collapsed. The massive ship above cracked with thunder, its glow flickering, sparks spilling from its hull. The fortress shook, the ground splitting wider, buildings crumbling. But the fire didn't stop. The humans pushed forward, tearing through what remained of the enemy line. The commander's light was broken. Its form lay exposed, staggering, bleeding. Its voice was no longer calm. It was desperate. "You cannot win. You are what we feared. You are the fire that ends worlds." The words carried no power anymore. Humanity knew them for what they were, not prophecy but fear. And in that final moment, the fire became more than rage. It became clarity. Humanity wasn't just surviving. They weren't just resisting. They were proving something the invaders had never believed possible, that the fire could be controlled, directed, given purpose. It didn't have to consume blindly. It could choose. The defenders struck as one. Weapons, fists, voices, all crashing down on the commander. The figure collapsed into the dirt, its glow extinguished, its words silenced. The great ship above broke apart in the sky, crashing in burning fragments across the horizon. The battlefield fell quiet. Smoke and ash drifted. Survivors staggered, bloodied, broken but alive. Against the impossible they had won. Humanity stood, scarred and battered but unbroken. The Inferno had consumed the invaders instead. For a moment it felt like victory. But then the device pulsed one last time. Its symbols flared, not in triumph but in warning. And the vision came again. Not of Earth, not of this battle, but of stars. Endless stars. Across them, other civilizations burned, other battles raged. Humanity was not the first to resist, but they might be the first to survive. And that survival carried a cost. The twist was cruel. By breaking free, humanity had marked itself. The fire that had once been hidden on one world was now seen. The cycle was broken, but in breaking it, humanity had revealed itself to the rest of the galaxy. Others would come. Not just the invaders who had fallen, but others who feared what humanity could become. The survivors looked to the sky, watching the burning fragments fall. They felt both triumph and dread. They had proven their strength, their unity, their will to endure. But the war was not over. It had only just begun. The Inferno had escaped its cage. And now the galaxy knew its name. The battlefield was still breathing smoke when the last echoes of the invasion faded. The fortress was gone, its walls shattered, its towers reduced to heaps of stone and twisted steel. The earth itself seemed scorched like it would never heal. And yet, in the middle of that ruin, people still stood. They leaned on each other, dirt-streaked, bloodied, exhausted to the bone. But they were alive. Humanity had endured what was meant to erase it. For a while no one spoke. The silence was heavier than the fight itself. Some stared at the fallen alien machines, waiting for them to rise again. Others looked to the sky, where burning fragments of the invaders' great ship still streaked through the atmosphere, crashing into distant lands with thunder that echoed for miles. It was the sound of an ending and yet also the start of something new. When voices finally came, they were soft at first. Survivors calling for loved ones, medics searching for the wounded. There were tears of relief when lost faces reappeared, and cries of grief when they didn't. Every name shouted into the ruins carried weight. Every answer, or silence, was carved into memory. At the heart of the ruin, the strange device pulsed one final time before dimming. The scientists circled it carefully, their faces pale. One of them whispered that it might be too dangerous to move. Another argued that it was too important to leave behind. For all its danger, the device had turned the tide. Without it, they might all have been ash. But its last vision, the stars filled with battles still raging, left no doubt. This wasn't the end. It was a warning. The leaders gathered what fighters were left, forming a rough council in the rubble. There was no table, no walls, no shelter. Just scorched stone and the survivors sitting shoulder to shoulder. They debated through the night, voices cracking with fatigue and grief. Should humanity bury the device and hope the galaxy forgot them? Or should they take it, study it, and prepare for what was coming? The arguments grew heated, sometimes bitter, but beneath every word was fear. Fear of what the future would demand of them. And yet there was something else too. Hope. They remembered the moment when everything seemed lost, when the alien commander's light had frozen them in place, stripping them of choice. They had felt powerless then, certain they would be crushed. But they hadn't been. They had found a way to move again, to fight back, to become more than prey. If they could do it once, maybe they could do it again. The survivors began to rebuild in small ways, even while the fires still smoldered. Someone dragged pieces of broken wood and made a cross to mark where their friends had fallen. Someone else found a cracked water pipe and began patching it with scraps, determined to give the living something to drink. Others searched the ruins for food, for blankets, for anything that might remind them of normal life. It wasn't much, but it was enough to remind them that even here, humanity's instinct was not just to endure, but to rebuild. Days turned into weeks. The ruins of the fortress became a gathering place, not just for those who had fought but for survivors who came from far-off towns and broken cities. Stories spread, how ordinary people had faced down impossible machines, how a shattered army had stood against a force that had destroyed worlds. Every telling grew the legend. Every retelling turned despair into defiance. Humanity's nightmare had become humanity's fire. Still questions remained. Why Earth? Why humanity? The scientists worked day and night on the alien device, their eyes haunted by what it might reveal. They spoke in low voices about the visions it gave, about the patterns hidden inside the light. Some claimed humanity was never meant to survive, that they were an accident in a cycle meant to burn out civilizations before they grew too strong. Others believed something deeper, that humanity was different, that their fire wasn't the same as those that had come before. And then came the hardest question of all: what now? The fortress was gone, but the war wasn't. Everyone knew the truth. Somewhere out there, in the endless dark of space, others had seen what humanity had done. The galaxy knew their name now, and not all would welcome it. Some might fear them. Some might come to destroy them before they grew stronger. And some might come to test them to see if the fire truly could endure. But fear didn't carry the day anymore. Humanity had looked into the face of extinction and refused to bow. That memory would never leave them. And so the decision was made. The device would not be buried. It would be studied, guarded, and used, not as a weapon to enslave but as a tool to prepare. Earth would not wait for the next invasion. Would be ready. The rebuilding was slow. Cities scarred by the alien assault rose again, but differently. Defense towers were built alongside homes. Training grounds appeared in the center of towns. Ordinary people took shifts watching the skies, their eyes sharp, their voices steady. Humanity had been forced into a nightmare, but now it was awake. Children played in streets once burned by alien fire, their laughter echoing against walls still blackened with soot. Farmers tilled fields where wrecked machines lay half-buried, their rusting frames reminders of what had been defeated. Life returned not because it was easy but because humanity refused to let it die. The device, guarded in a new underground chamber, pulsed faintly still. Scientists spoke of new discoveries, fragments of knowledge hidden inside, warnings of enemies beyond imagining, but also hints of something else. A chance. A way to rise not as prey in a cycle but as something new. Humanity listened and prepared. Years later, when the first ships were built to leave Earth, they were not made with fear. They were not made to run. They were made with purpose. To seek, to learn, to watch the stars, and to show that humanity would never again be caught in silence. The survivors of the fortress grew old, but their story did not fade. It was told around fires, in classrooms, in quiet homes where parents whispered to children about the night the sky burned. It became part of who they were, etched into the soul of humanity itself. And though the galaxy was vast, though dangers greater than the invaders still waited in its depths, humanity no longer walked with bowed heads. They carried the memory of the Inferno not as fear but as proof. Proof that no matter how small they seemed, no matter how fragile, they could burn brighter than anyone expected. The invaders had lit the fire. But humanity had become the Inferno. And no one, not even the stars themselves, could forget it. And that's where our story ends for now. Humanity stood against the fire, and became something the galaxy could never forget. Thank you for joining me on this journey. If you felt that spark of defiance, that pride in what makes us human, then you already know what HFY is all about. More stories are coming, bigger, darker, and even more human. So stay tuned and remember, in the vastness of the stars, we are never as small as we seem.